Okay, here's the tutorial for the Swindled routine. I'm going to show you 3 different methods of accomplishing the effect, and I'll start with the one that I used in the video. So the trick is completely impromptu. All you need is just a normal deck and a normal card box with nothing in it and nothing under it. Now if you want, you can start out the trick by having the spectator shuffle the deck, and then you proceed to take out the 4 aces and the 4 kings, or whatever 2 sets of 4 of a kind you're using. But if you want to save time, you can just go ahead and set them on top of the deck and deal them off. It's just an optional thing that you can use to save time. Really doesn't matter. Now the order of the aces is unimportant, but the order of the kings has to be black, red, black, red. The reason for this is later on in the trick you're going to be doing an Elmsley count. And of course you show the top card twice when you do an Elmsley count. And the card that will be shown twice will be second from the left, which is going to be the King of Hearts. Now it's less noticeable to show a red card twice than a black card twice, which is why you want to do this. Also, with the Elmsley count, you'll show the King of Hearts twice, and then the King of Spades once and the King of Clubs once. So the spectator's going to see 2 red kings and 2 black kings, which keeps everything clean and consistent looking, whereas it wouldn't be the case if you were showing 3 black kings and a red king or 3 red kings and a black king. So the order of the kings is just important for the Elmsley count later on. Okay, so what you're going to do is just thumb off the 4 kings and flip them over. And this is going to leave you with the 4 kings on top of the deck, of course, and the 4 aces in your hand. Now what you want to do is take 3 kings from the deck and add them to the bottom of the packet with the aces. Now, the way I do this is I use the packet of aces to shield the corner where my pinky is. That way I can pinky count 3 cards, so I have a break under 3 of the kings, and then just steal them away onto the bottom of the packet. Now if you can't do the pinky count, I would not recommend you doing the push-off break because this is really noticeable and I don't think it looks good at all. Now the pinky count is going to make the trick look the cleanest, it's going to look the smoothest, but the best alternative would be just to lightly pull up on the back of the deck with your thumb to get a break that way. So just lightly pull up on the back, get a break, would be, in my opinion, the best alternative. But like I said, the way I do it is using the pinky count. Bottom line is you need to steal away 3 of the kings and add them to this packet. Make sure everything stays nice and squared up. That way they can't see any of the face-down cards underneath. And also make sure that you don't flash this front edge because it's really thick. And you can tell that there's more than 4 cards in there. So when you're performing this, you want to make sure your wrists are angled down so the spectator sees the face of the card and not the front edge. Just a little something to keep in mind. Now holding the cards in a biddle grip, you're just going to flip over the 4 aces, and so flip over one of the aces. Then with the second ace that you flip over, you're going to catch a thumb break. And then flip over the remaining 2 aces and put them under the thumb break. So what you've got right now is you have 3 aces on the bottom, then your thumb break, then another ace, and then 3 of the kings. So that's exactly how you want to be set up. And what you're going to do is be adding these 3 aces that you have the break on top of underneath the card box. So when you go to pick up the box, I'll give you a couple handling tips for this. One is when you actually are picking it up, try to line this up as best as possible. So you notice how we have a perfect alignment here. So that way when you flip the box over, there's nothing protruding that you can see on either of the edges. Whereas if you picked it up and it was off, you don't want anything like this where you can see any pips or any edges of the cards along the side. It just doesn't look good. So try and keep it as squared up as possible. And then what you're going to do is when you go to set the box back down, you're going to grab onto the box along with the 3 cards that you had a break under and set everything down. And be careful not to flash these, so it's best to keep the box angled more towards yourself. And also be careful setting the box down so as you don't flash any of the aces underneath it, because it's really easy for this box to slide around, so be extra careful when setting it down. So you're set up just like this, and you want to get that ace into the 3rd position for an Elmsley count. And the way that I did this is just do a 4-card display, and then you switch the order of the cards. So you're now set up perfectly for an Elmsley count. Also notice that you see a red king, a black king, and a red king. 2 reds, 2 blacks, which keeps everything clean looking, and it's not really that noticeable that you showed the King of Hearts twice. So now you're set up with 1 ace and the 4 kings. So what you're going to do is now execute the Braille reversal. Get a thumb break underneath the top card, which is that ace that was on top. And then what you're going to do, I'll just briefly go through how to do the Braille reversal. Take about half the cards off the bottom, flip them over and put them on top to join with that card that you had a break under, and then take the remainder of the cards that are underneath the break, flip them over, and keep them on the bottom. And that's going to set your ace face up in the center of the deck. And I do have a more detailed tutorial on the Braille reversal. I'll put a link on the screen somewhere if you want any help with that. So now the sleight of hand is over for the first part of the routine. It's all showmanship. Just spread out the cards, show that one ace is in the center, set the deck aside, and that the other 3 aces are underneath the card box. And now we get into the second part of the routine. So what I like about this method is it leaves the 4 kings right on top of the deck, so you're all set to go. Now if you want, you can give the deck a couple of riffle shuffles like I did in my performance video. It just kind of fits in well with the pattern because you just talked about cheating, and now this is like basically saying, oh, well, this makes sure that there isn't any cheating. But it's not really necessary. It's just an optional thing. And just if you do decide to shuffle the card, just make sure that you keep the 4 kings on top. Now you get your spectators select a card. They can pick anyone they want and just set that off to the side. Now you need to get a break underneath the 4 kings. And I said this before, I'll mention it just one more time. If you can't do the pinky count, just lightly pull up on the back with your thumb because it looks the best. So get that pinky break underneath the 4 kings. Scoop up the 4 aces. And as you go to square up the aces on the deck, you're going to steal away the 4 kings that you have the break underneath with the 4 aces. So your packet will now have the 4 aces with the 4 kings underneath it. And once again, make sure all this stays squared up nice and tight, and that you don't flash the front edge, which is really thick. Now essentially what you're going to be doing here is taking the 4 kings that were on the deck and switching them with the 4 aces that were on the table. And I'll show you just a couple different ways of doing this. They're really just slight variations, and you can just see whatever works best. So what I did in the video was flip off an ace, push it out, and then catch a thumb break underneath it. And then I did this 3 more times with the other 3 aces. But when I got to the last ace, so I now have a thumb break under 3 of them. When I get to the last ace and I go to push it under, what I'm going to do is drop all of the cards on top of the deck like that. So that way I'm left with the 4 aces on the deck, and I now have the 4 kings here that I can just cleanly deal off. So that's the way I did it in the video. Now the alternative method would rather than dropping the 4 aces on the deck all at once, you can do it individually. So flip over an ace, push it off, and then when you go to square it up, just drop it on top of the deck. And then you can do that 4 times. I prefer just to drop all 4 of the aces at once, but if this happens to work better for you, it's just something to keep in mind, something you might want to try. And then for the final method of doing this, it doesn't require any breaks or anything. It's a little easier, but I don't think it quite looks as good as the first 2 methods. Is what you're just going to do is just flip the aces, flip over all 4 of the aces and add them to the bottom of the packet. Don't have to worry about any thumb breaks. So now you have your 8 cards here. You have the 4 kings on top and the 4 aces are on the bottom. You just set this packet down and you can deal off the 4 kings. So it's just 3 different ways of exchanging the aces on the table for the kings on the deck. And you can just see whatever works best for you. So now what you're going to do is get a pinky break underneath the 4 aces, and you're going to execute the Braille reversal. So while the spectator is preoccupied memorizing that card, you're going to transfer that pinky break over to a thumb break, and you're going to once again execute the Braille reversal. So one more time real quick, take about half the cards, flip them over, put them on top to join with the cards that you had a break under, and take the remainder of the cards, flip them over, and put them on top. And this is going to take the 4 aces and put them face down on the bottom of the deck. And even though the Braille reversal is a move that the spectator can look at your hands and they still won't see anything happen, it just kind of makes the trick look a little cleaner, that they're kind of preoccupied memorizing their card and they're not really watching your hands, so it just makes the trick look even better. Anyway, once you're at this point, what you're going to do is do a pinky pull down on the bottom 2 cards, just like this. So using your pinky, just pull down the bottom 2 cards on the deck, and you want to take the selected card and slide it right into that break. Now, the card, you want to say that the card's going into the middle, and it's actually going in right towards the bottom, but to make it look like it's going in more towards the center of the deck, It creates a good illusion if you bend the card upwards as you're pushing it in. So it just creates a nice little illusion. And then you can just cut the deck. And now the sleight of hand is over for the second part. You can just spread out the cards to show that the 4 aces have trapped one card and one card only, which of course is the spectator's selected card. And then for the grand finale, reveal the 4 kings. And that is the tutorial for the first method. Now let's get into the second method. The second method was actually the original method that I came up with, but then I discovered the first version, which was a little easier and also looked a little cleaner, so I decided to go with it. Anyway, again, the order of the aces doesn't matter, but you want the kings to go red, black, for Elmsley count purposes again. And you also want to start with the deck face up rather than face down. So you'll hold this packet in a biddle grip, and then you're going to thumb off one of the kings and catch a pinky break. Do this 2 more times. So you'll now have a pinky break underneath 3 of the kings. Now what you want to do is take these 3 kings and return them to the bottom of this packet while you thumb off the 4th and final king. And the way you're going to do this is as you go to peel off this king, you're going to grab on to those other 3 kings with your thumb and pull them out while this king gets thumbed off. So you'll be left with just 1 king on top of the deck and the other 3 kings underneath the 4 aces. Now, a couple of handling tips that you'll want to keep in mind with this, because this is a move that's very easy to make it look really noisy, unsmooth, and suspicious looking. 1, this is a really little thing. It's really easy to do, but it does make a big difference. These first 3 kings, you want to make sure that they're squared up nice and tight. It really is a little thing, but if they're all over the place like this, it makes the packet switch a lot harder. So just make sure that the 3 kings do stay nice and squared up. And also, do this move gently and don't do it too fast, because it will reduce the noise that it's going to make, and it'll just make it look a lot better. Don't go too slow, but just keep a nice gentle medium pace, so it should essentially look like this. Just like that, not very much noise, and it looks just clean and it looks smooth. And then one more thing. When you're coming away with this packet, make sure that none of the pips of the kings are sticking out like this where you can see them. Make sure this stays squared up, and also make sure that you can't see any of the pips underneath this king, revealing that you only have 1 king on top. That's another thing to keep in mind. And it's also important that you take this king and you cut it into the center of the deck, and I'll explain why in a minute. So this next part's easy. You just thumb off 3 of the aces individually, put them underneath, and catch a thumb break. So you'll have 3 aces, a break, 3 kings, and then the final ace. Go to pick up the box again. And again, you want this to be as squared up as possible. However, it's not important with this version as it is with the first, mainly because if anything is protruding, all the spectator's going to see is the back of a card, whereas with the first version, they'll see pips of a card, which can obviously give away the trick. So it was much more important with the first one. But you still want to try and get it as squared up as best you can, but if you have a little something sticking out, it won't be that big of a deal. And then you just steal those 3 aces away and set the box down carefully. So the next part's the same again. Just do your 4-card display and switch the order. And then Elmsley count, and again notice you show a red, a black, and a red. So everything stays good with the Elmsley count. So you have that ace on top of the deck now. You're going to once again execute the Bry reversal. So get a break underneath the top card. Take about half the cards, flip them over, and put them on top to join with that ace that you had a break under. And then the remainder of the cards get flipped over and kept on the bottom. Now here's why it's important that that king, at the very beginning of the trick, you want to cut that king into the center. When you're doing the Bry reversal, if you don't cut the king into the center, it's left on the bottom of the deck, and when you flip over the packets to do a Bry reversal, the spectator's going to see that king, which obviously doesn't make sense because you just showed all 4 kings to them with an Elmsley count, or at least they think they saw all 4 of the kings with an Elmsley count, and so all 4 of the kings in their eyes are on top of the deck. So it wouldn't make sense for one of them to be on the bottom. That's why it's important that you cut that king into the center to avoid a big discrepancy like that. Anyway, after the Bry reversal, that ace will be in the center, and once again your sleight of hand is done for this part. So you just spread out the cards to show that, and show that the other 3 aces are underneath the card box. Okay, now on to the second phase. Now the reason that I don't like this one as much as the first method is because you're left with only 3 kings on top and another king is lost randomly in the middle, whereas with the first method, all 4 kings are on top and ready to go, which makes things a lot easier. So what you have to do is get all 4 kings controlled to the top of the deck, and this is how you're going to do that. You're going to make a slight presentation change and tell the spectator that you're going to select a card for yourself, and you're going to look for that king right there. Now, of course, when you're doing this, your hands are going to be tilted towards yourself so they can't see what you're doing. You're going to take the card right next to the king and set it down, and then as you join these 2 halves back together, you're just going to catch a pinky break. So now, this is why the pattern works well, is you tell your spectator that you're going to give the deck a really thorough shuffle to avoid any cheating, which makes sense since you just gave a 2-minute speech on cheating with the first part of the routine. And this is how you're going to control the 4 kings to the top. Transfer that pinky break to a thumb break, and this is exaggerated in performance. It would be a lot smaller. And also, it's a good idea to turn to the side when you're doing this. That way the spectator sees this part of the deck and doesn't see any breaks. So that's just a good thing to watch with the angles. What you're going to do is thumb off 3 of the cards individually, and these are the 3 kings, and then shuffle off until you get to the thumb break. When you get to the break, in-jog one card, which is the king, and then shuffle off on top of it. Take this in-jogged card, push it in, or push it down, and then push it in to catch another thumb break. Shuffle off until you get to that thumb break. And then when you get to that thumb break, in-jog one card, which again is a king, and then you have the other 3 kings on the bottom of this packet, so you just drop this whole thing on top. And now you'll have 3 kings in the center and then 1 in-jogged king. Take the in-jogged king, push it up, and then push it in to catch another thumb break, and then give the deck a cut right at that break. And that controls the 4 kings to the bottom. To get them to the top, you're going to get your spectator to select a card, and you're going to go to the overhand shuffle position again and start running off cards individually, and ask them to say stop. Now, they can say stop wherever they want. It really makes no difference, so let's say they just say stop right there. And what's good is because you were already kind of doing an overhand shuffle, it seems logical to keep doing an overhand shuffle, which is exactly what you need to do, because when you start to get down to the last few cards, you want to run them off individually. That way, the 4 kings get controlled to the top. And you're right where you need to be. So again, get a break underneath, get a pinky break underneath the 4 kings, and then you can just pick up the 4 aces, and once again steal away the 4 kings with the 4 aces. And then essentially you're just going to be swapping the aces and the kings, so you can use any one of the 3 methods that I showed you before. Or if you have another method that you like to use that you've come up with, of course you can use that as well. Bottom line, switch the aces out with the kings. And now again, you need to get your pinky break underneath the 4 aces. And then while the spectator is preoccupied memorizing the 2 selected cards, transfer that pinky break into the thumb break and then do another Braille reversal, so that the 4 aces are left on the bottom. And then this is also the same as before. Pinky pull down the bottom 2 cards, take both of the selections and slide them right into that break, and then push them up. That way it creates the illusion that they're going into the center rather than the bottom, and give the deck a cut. And boom. Spread out the cards, show that the aces have trapped the 2 selections, and once again for the grand finale you show that you have the 4 kings. And that is it for the second method. Now let's get on to the third version of the trick. Okay, I'm just going to run through the third method really quickly since it's only slightly different from the second method. So it's the same setup. Aces don't matter, but you want the kings to be red, black, and you want the deck face up. You're going to be doing the exact same packet switch that you did with the second method, where you get a pinky break underneath the 3 kings and then you swap them out. And here's where it starts to get different. Of course you need to cut this king into the center of the deck, but you want that cut to be as equal as possible. I'm not sure if that's perfect or not, but it looks pretty close. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but you want to get it as close as you possibly can. And I'll explain why the cut needs to be perfect in a couple of minutes. So again, let me go really quick through this since you've already seen it. Peel off the 3 kings, put them underneath, catch a thumb break. then go to pick up the box and steal away those 3 aces when you set the box back down. Do your little 4-card display, switch the order, and then do the Elmsley count. Okay, so now here's where it gets a little different. You're going to do the brow reversal, just like before, with the top card, which is an ace, but you want the cut to be perfect with the brow reversal, just like you wanted it to be perfect when you were cutting the king in the center. So you can't take a small portion and put it on top, you can't take a large portion, you have to get it as close to the middle as you can. So it might help to kind of riffle down the side with your thumb until you think you're about at the center when you're doing the brow reversal. And again, I'll get to why this is really important in a second. Let me just fly through this since you've already seen it. So notice how the ace is almost in the dead center of the deck. This is a good indicator that your cuts were close to perfect if that ace is about in the center. Okay. Now, just like before with the second method, you have 3 kings on top, and you have the 4th king randomly in the middle of the deck. But you'll notice, because of the perfect cuts we were making, that king is almost in the dead center. The reason you want it to be really close to the center is because you're going to be controlling it to the top using a riffle shuffle. So what you're going to do is riffle along the back of the deck. So I'll try and show you this as best as I can. You want to, with your thumb, lightly riffle along the back of the deck until you find that king. So if you know that it's right close to the middle, see, I just found it, it's right there. If you know it's right close to the middle, it shouldn't take you longer than a second or 2 to find, and that's the purpose, is that you want to be able to find it as fast as you possibly can, and if you already know where to look, which should be right towards the center of the deck, it makes things a lot easier. Once you find the king, you're going to riffle it off onto this bottom packet and then cut the deck there for a riffle shuffle. So you have this king there and then the other 3 kings here. And then go into your riffle shuffle. What you're going to do is hold back that king with your thumb and let it be the last card down on top of the other 3 kings so that it's on top. So again, I actually like the way that it's controlled with the riffle shuffle. I think it looks really good. And again, you have a good excuse to be shuffling the cards in the first place because you just gave them the speech about cheating in a poker game with the first part of the routine. So it makes sense that you're doing a shuffle. And I think it looks really clean and it looks great and everything, but the one thing I don't like is that you have to be so precise with the cuts, which can be a pain, which is why I really don't use this method. Like I said, my first method is probably my favorite. Anyway, so now from here you just get your card selected and the rest of the trick is pretty much the same, so I won't really even go into it since you've already seen it a couple of times and get the point, but that is it for the third method. Like I said, it can be a little bit of a pain, but you might find it to work to your advantage if you don't mind being precise with the cuts, because I think it really does look good with the riffle shuffle control. It looks a lot better than the overhand shuffle, in my opinion, but it's just a little bit of a pain sometimes if your cuts aren't perfect. And that is pretty much it for the Swindled routine, but if you're still confused about anything, just ask me a question in the comments or you can send me a personal message, and that's pretty much it.